Even the best laid plans suffer, and when they do, you have two choices: accept them and hang your head, or pick yourself up and make things right. The latter is always the best choice, but if your issue is a movie sequence that was filmed that no one now wants, it could cost you a small fortune. It's been known for a while that movies shoot more footage than audiences ever see, but usually it's an ad-lib or a line flub. When it's a giant set piece, it'll swell your budget and make studio accountants sweat. Share this video with your less frugal friends, reminding them that money doesn't grow on trees, and enjoy watching the 10 most expensive deleted scenes that movies never used. Ghostbusters 2016. When you're rebooting a classic film, a gender swap is a great way to shake things up. In 2016, the Ghostbusters franchise received an injection of new blood with an all-female squad of folks who feel good when busting the paranormal. Along with the women, the film cast Chris Hemsworth as Kevin, the handsome but not very bright secretary. As the movie begins its third act, Kevin finds himself embodied by the spirit of Rowan, the film's antagonist. Taking advantage of Kevin's good looks, he forces a huge crowd in Times Square to get their boogie on, leading them through a large-scale dance number. Even though the scene cost over $1 million to film, it was cut because it ruined the flow of the film's ending. Some footage was reworked into the credits, giving audiences a small taste of Hemsworth's sweet dance moves.
Sounds very scary. It's probably because you got a lot of bad karma from your previous lot.
The Goonies. For years, one question haunted fans of the 1985 film The Goonies. Okay, haunted is a strong word, but more than a few people were confused by Data's reference to a very scary octopus as the wayward youths are rescued near the end of the film. If you still don't know, he's referring to a giant 8-tentacled sea creature that attacks the Goonies before they board One-Eyed Willie's pirate ship. Richard Donner, the director of the film, never explained why the scene was removed. Even though it was initially deemed unnecessary, it aired during the 90s on the Disney Channel when it needed additional footage after cutting scenes for standards. An exact cost isn't available for the scene, but it's estimated it would cost over $500,000 if that scene was shot today.
Oh God. Oh God.
The Man Who Killed Don Quixote. Some movies aren't very good, but at least there's a finished film to enjoy, or to make fun of on the internet. One movie that famously fell apart is The Man Who Killed Don Quixote. The adaptation of the Spanish novel, published in the early 1600s, tells the tale of an insane man out to cure the world of what ails it. Notoriously finicky director and former member of Monty Python, Terry Gilliam's film fell apart due to location issues, illness, and financial issues. Over $20 million was lost due to the film never being made. Footage eventually resurfaced in the making of documentary Lost in La Mancha, which had to be released independently because Gilliam was unable to finish the documentary about the film he was unable to finish.
Didn't work this time.
The Wizard of Oz. One of the most famous films ever made, The Wizard of Oz had a rough and complicated production with multiple directors and numerous rewrites. One famous scene that didn't make the final cut is a moment that finds the heroes of the film, Dorothy, Scarecrow, Tin Man, and the Cowardly Lion, being forced to dance the jitterbug, a popular dance at the time. In the scene, as they travel through the haunted woods, they're accosted by evil bugs who force them to boogie against their will. The whole scene cost about $80,000 at the time, but the cost of cutting 5 weeks worth of filming today would be astronomical. The footage was destroyed, but a dress rehearsal was recorded and eventually included as an extra on the DVD release.
No, I know we're not in Kansas.
Cleopatra. The story of the last ruler of the Egyptian dynasty, Cleopatra VII Philopator, or simply Cleopatra to her BFFs, almost forced 20th Century Fox to close its doors forever. With an initial budget of $2 million, the film ended up costing over $31 million, making it the most expensive film ever made at the time of its filming in 1963. Initial filming began in London, but when the weather wouldn't cooperate, the entire production moved to Rome, rebuilding every set. The film's star, Elizabeth Taylor, commanded a $1 million salary, which ballooned to $7 million because of the delays in filming. Perhaps the biggest loss of money was having over a third of the film shelved. The final cut was over 6 hours, but the studio balked at the length and cut almost half out. If a modern movie did that, it'd cost them over $100 million.
We've gotten off to a bad start, haven't we?
Gangster Squad. Sometimes you make a quality movie with no issues, and then real life happens and you need to make adjustments, even if it costs you a ton of moolah. The original ending to the movie involved gangsters barging into a movie theater in the 1940s and shooting up the place, and the producers of the film felt releasing the movie with a final set piece so similar to real life would be insensitive, and cause the movie to lose money. A few weeks later, the film's stars, including Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone, met for weeks of reshoots to create a new scenario for the final act. A few moments of the original scene can still be seen in the first trailer of the film.
Bang.
Superman Returns. Ask younger fans to name the famous superhero actor Brandon Routh portrayed, and most would answer the Atom from the various CW shows of the Arrowverse. While his version of DC's incredible shrinking and sometimes growing, which is nothing like Ant-Man, Ray Palmer is good, Routh was once the Man of Steel in Superman Returns. Bryan Singer's homage to the 1980s Superman films did okay, but it ended up being Routh's only time wearing the blue spandex and red cape of the Kryptonian Kal-El. Apparently fearing no one remembered one of the most famous origin stories in comic history, Singer filmed a 6-minute, dialogue-free scene of the infant son of Jor-El crashing into the Kent farm. The scene is gorgeous, and it should be, because it cost the studio over $12 million to film it.
High five!
Back to the Future. Speaking of the 1980s, one of the biggest movies of all time, Back to the Future is one of the defining movies of the decade of decadence. When the money's flowing, what's another few $1 million added to the budget? Very few actors seem more perfectly cast than Michael J. Fox as the film's time-traveling protagonist, Marty McFly. Now imagine how many minds were blown when it was discovered that Fox was not the original Marty. He was the first choice, of course, but he had commitments, so they moved on and filmed 5 weeks of footage with a young Eric Stoltz, a move that cost them an extra $4 million at the time. It became apparent that Stoltz wasn't right for the role, and director Robert Zemeckis and Steven Spielberg had to convince the studio for more cash. While it may have been tense at the time, given the legacy of the film, it was the correct call.
Everything looks great.
X-Men: Days of Future Past. When you're the first X-Men film to be nominated for an Oscar, as X-Men: Days of Future Past was for Best Visual Effects, it would appear you made all the right choices during filming. In the case of the chronologically confusing Days of Future Past, maybe not. For example, if you shoot a whole slew of scenes featuring Rogue, played by Anna Paquin, and then you decide to not use them, it seems like a poor choice, or at least a confusing one. Paquin shot a variety of scenes, including a series of moments where the older versions of Magneto and Professor X rescue a missing Rogue. The actress was paid almost $3 million for the movie, and combined with the cost of 2 weeks of lost filming, estimates put the mutant cutting decision at over $20 million.
I think I'd like to wake up now.
World War Z. When Brad Pitt wants to make a zombie film, you let him. When Brad Pitt wants to end that movie on a serious downer, you waste $25 million. Pitt's character, a former UN employee named Jerry Lane, fights his way through the hallways of a laboratory and lives as happily ever after as he can after a global zombie invasion. In the original ending, he was supposed to trek across Russia to find his family while leading the Russian army in a large-scale battle for the frozen tundra of Siberia. The dreary ending would set up a trilogy of films, but left executives feeling the conclusion was a real downer. After it was decided the ending didn't work, new writers were brought in to rewrite the entire third act, which resulted in 7 weeks of reshoots.
We don't know if any of them will work.
We all make mistakes. To err is human, as Alexander Pope once said. Do you think any of these should have stayed in the films? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to CBR's channel and give us a like before you leave. Thanks for watching.